In this demonstration, I'll provide an overview of candidates, their statuses, and how to enter them into the system. It's important to remember that candidates have status, whereas cases have stages. So let's talk about the candidate statuses. The various statuses are listed here on the screen, starting with preliminary, active, inactive, eligible for hire, hired, withdrew, disqualified, and permanent disqualification. They're all pretty much self-explanatory except for preliminary. What's the difference between a preliminary and an active candidate? Well, let's talk about that. A preliminary candidate is a candidate who is simply residing in the system to be there with no actions to be taken. There is no investigator assigned. There are no associated PHS records. The preliminary candidate becomes an active candidate automatically whenever an investigator is assigned. And at that same time, a PHS record is created automatically. If you import candidates from a spreadsheet, they will automatically become preliminary candidates. An active candidate is the typical status for a candidate under investigation. For the rest of the statuses, I'll leave it to you to assign them as you see fit. They are pretty much self-explanatory. And the only other thing to remember is that POBITS doesn't change the status of the candidates for you, except as I mentioned with the change from preliminary candidate to active candidate when an investigator is signed. At no other time does it change the status of a candidate. That's up to you. All right, let's look at how we go about entering candidates. From the new drop-down button on the button bar, drop it down and you can see there is an option for a new candidate and a new preliminary candidate. Let's start with preliminary candidates. So to add a preliminary candidate, you can see there are not very many fields required, and only 2 of them, the first name and the last name, are actually required. So it's real easy to put a candidate in the system as a preliminary candidate where they reside as sort of a holding point for later use. Note that if you enter the Social Security number when entering a candidate, the system will look to see if you already have a candidate with that Social Security number, and it will let you know. And if you do, we recommend that you continue to use that same candidate and add another PHS record to it representing a new investigation of the same candidate. All of the other fields are optional. As much as you have or as much as you want to enter is at your discretion. Now let's take a look at adding an active candidate. So same thing, go to the new menu and we'll select candidate. The form is essentially the same, but it has a couple of other fields, namely the investigator field, the group name field. As I mentioned earlier, when you assign an investigator, the candidate will automatically become active and a PHS record will be created. And that's about the only difference between entering a new candidate and entering a preliminary candidate. In another video, I'll be showing you how to deal with preliminary candidates and how to make them active candidates sort of en masse. So that's about all there is to entering a candidate in the system. Choose either method you want to, and as you can see, it's really easy to put a candidate into the system, and once assigned to an investigator, they will appear on that investigator's recently updated candidates for use and for future investigation.